Hey guys, this is a custom flow video, and first of all I want to start showing you how she naturally fills her brows in, and then on this right, this is the goal shape we're going to do. She's very nervous about altering how she's been filling them in because she's been doing it for years, but as you can see, her tail just cut off her face. So, and this is her before brow. And as you can see, there are just no tails. She did undergo chemotherapy 4 different times, so that is what happened. And this is the brow mapping that we have decided to do for her. It's a very nice soft arch, kind of a curvy brow, very natural, but again, opening up those outside tails, and I think it's actually going to open up her eye and her face quite a bit. I'm very excited. And we're just going to jump right in here. The main thing is she's very concerned about having them heal with some nice space and have them be more of an airy brow. So this is going to have a few less strokes, and instead of more elongated strokes, I'm actually going to have kind of do my strokes in V's. So for example, you know me, and I'll normally drag this all the way up to the top. Well, instead I'm going to do 2 smaller, shorter strokes. And this is still the same system for matching her hair, but again, it's just kind of a difference in stroke style. So the areas that we begin with, for example, starting in the center, and then we'll do each section, either mark the center and then either the top or bottom. That's all the same, but as you can see, these are just a little bit more shorter, lighter strokes. And this will give a very natural brow, and some of you actually will probably think that this is will give a more preferred finished result. I won't necessarily argue with you on that. However, the way I normally microblade, kind of longer, and see, I'm marking my bone area as we always do. Okay. And I do the center until it's curving sideways, as you see, and I'm gonna now do this bottom section. Okay, so again, I'm doing V's. So 1 touching the line, then I'm actually gonna do 1. Let's see here. I had to curve that one a little bit more. Okay, there we go. So 1 not touching the line, and 1 touching the outline. So see, some people see these as V's, some people see these as W's, but this is just a stroke pattern I'm using to give a little bit more wispy and natural result. So again, I love how these brows look right away, and by keeping them more spaced, you actually do heal with more texture instead of having it all blend together. And people with not very much hair, I feel like this gives a more natural result. The only reason people with more hair, I tend to microblade the other way with, again, longer and more even strokes, is simply because the shorter your strokes, the beginning and end of each stroke tends to heal not very well. So then the brows like this tend to heal a little bit more spotty. Now on touch-up, of course, you can fix that and kind of tie that all together. But if it's within a brow with more hair, again, that's why I tend to microblade the other way. It's because I prefer the healed result. Now, brows like this, again, with very little hair, this heals better. So the way I choose to microblade is not just because of what I feel like that day. It's what's going to heal best on that client. Now, what I am doing is meeting down to where the hair grows sideways, but I'm actually spacing these strokes a bit more because, again, I'm going with that V or W pattern, whatever you want to call it. So I'm spacing these strokes, and then I'm going to go back in and do my V stroke in between. And again, the important part of V stroke is that you want to meet, you can choose either the top or the bottom of each stroke. You want to meet the other stroke, or but also you usually want to start it a little bit above so that they're not beginning at the same point. Like this, see, I'm not quite meeting the line just like I did on the bottom. And then I'm just drawing it all the way to where the other stroke ends to create that V. Just like that. And this is just going to be, again, a really soft, natural brown because she has so little hair. There we go. It's just going to give us a little more texture and look more natural than if I did my normal pattern of more elongated strokes. And she might heal a little bit more patchy. That is okay. It's easily fixable at touch-up. Okay, so now I'm just going to rub this ink in. And I'm really working it in there with this micro tip. There we go. We just want to get as much ink into her as possible. She has had lots of tattoos, and she told me she's normally a heavy bleeder, as well as a heavy lymph producer, and gets pretty scabby. So because she told me that, I am going to try to do only 2 passes on her instead of 3. Oh, okay. I also wanted to point out, see if you see I did a second line in the center. If I zoomed out, I could show you, but her nose points just a little bit to that right. And so, although that is centered with her eyes, we decided to bring it over just a skosh, like 2 hairs, just to balance it with her nose a little bit. And I always ask the client, do you want to be balanced with your eyes or your nose? And I show them. Usually it's different. And at first she had said, let's balance it with my eyes. But then once we had it filled out and drawn on there, I thought it looked pretty good. But she said, oh man, I see what you're saying about my nose. So we decided to scooch it over just 2 hairs last second. Anyways, okay, so now I'm just going to do the same thing. Now this brow is interesting. As you can see, the bone strokes, the center where the hair is flowing sideways is much higher. So we are going to have a different pattern on this side in order to blend with the little bit of hair that is there. But first we're just going to start with our center strokes, which are going to look remarkably similar to our left brow. I'm going to change angles here in just a second so you can see this a little bit better. I'm always battling. Okay, so part of getting your best stroke is not just your stretch, but it's keeping your needle extremely straight. You can't have it tilt to the left or the right at all. And part of that, for me, having the best result is having my body be directly behind my needle. So I'm just pulling towards my body. And then that means my head is over my microblading needle. So the issue with that is that when filming, either my pen or my head is usually right where the camera should be. So I'm sorry, I'm still honestly learning the best way to still get the best results possible, but film in a way that you can see what I'm doing. And I promise I'm intend to continually do new videos, at least 1 or 2 a month, and I'll probably replace almost everything that's currently up over the years, but okay, there we go. So I'm sure I'll perfect this as I go along, and probably my technique over the years. So hopefully we all should be improving. Okay, but yes, see, her bone center strokes are very much so higher than on the other side. So there's going to be a lot more on the bottom of this brow than the other. And then just a few lighter strokes on that top. But I bet you anything, you'll see at the end, but it's, when you look at the brows separately, they're still going to look very, very, very balanced. I actually think it looks more natural to have a different flow pattern on each brow, especially if you're following their natural hair. And I'm using this same trick where I'm actually doing a stroke, spacing it, doing a stroke, spacing it, and then going back and filling in that V. And again, every other line or every other hair is, one is touching the outline and then one is not. Okay. And just going to continue on. And make sure that you always have a slight curve to your lines. We never want to draw a super, super straight line unless we're doing the very front of the brow. And even then, having a more curved line is preferable. The only time I truly do a super straight line in the center is if the client requests it. But getting a nice curve in each hair is going to give you a more natural result, and it's going to help meet that body and bone in the center and have everything blend together better in the center. And by the way, curving your strokes will blow out your lines if you do it with a straight blade. This is why I only ever use curved blades. I should actually do a video specifically on that and explaining that. Hey, there's a video idea. I will do it. So as you see, a lot of her brow was in that bottom, unlike the other side. Now I'm going to lay in the spaced top strokes. As you see, each line just has a nice little curve to it, meeting at a V in the center that we marked. Give us that nice flow. What's so nice about her having so little hair is that it just, every single stroke really is showing for the camera well. Yay. Sorry, it keeps focusing on my finger instead of her skin. Hopefully it'll come back into focus here in a second. But still, you can see we're just doing those more spaced, angled strokes, moving down, filling in the space. It's so nice when you have a really solid outline so you don't have to second guess it. Ugh. Okay, there we go. So we've got all our basic lines in. Now we're just putting in those V strokes. And again, not coming quite to the tippy top of our outline. We're wanting to stagger that top line just a little bit, and that'll give us a really nice natural softness to the edges of the brow. And normally I tend to only stagger those strokes on the top and kind of keep it more crisp on the bottom. But she has requested a more natural brow on top and bottom. So again, we're keeping that underside of her brow nice and soft as well. I know this transition area is a tough one. I tend to, okay, there's really 2 strokes there. But I tend to do it a little different on every client, to be honest. If they have any hair in that area, follow what the hair is doing. If they don't, use your best judgment, but just make sure you keep it nice and curved in that connecting area and make V's and you'll be good. Okay, so here's this brow. And yeah, she is a little bit of a bleeder. I can't express to you what light pressure I was using. So I'm surprised that there's any blood at all, to be honest. It'll be interesting to blot her with a, sorry, I'm really trying to scrub this in here. A, to get a good amount of pigment into her skin, but B, it will actually also help cauterize all that a little bit. Okay. So now we'll just get this other side numbing. But anyways, what I was just saying earlier is that I'm looking forward to blotting her with tissue to see if she's right in the fact that she produces a lot of lymph. But I believe her. She says if she's a heavy scabber, likely she does produce a lot of lymph. Okay, beautiful. And you can see how light those strokes are, even though I really got some nice, microtip scrubbed that pigment in there. It's still very light in her skin. Crossing my fingers again because of the lymph that we only have to do 2 passes. So for the second pass, just to help get more pigment into the skin, I'm going to do that reverse stroke that I sometimes do as a 3rd pass to get more ink in. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go to the Secrets to Crisp Strokes, and I think it's the tip number 3 or 2. Okay, and this is just our secondary numbing, which I'm always mixing super juice and ultra duration. I also need to do a video on this, but the reason I do that is because ultra duration is fabulous. It's just 4 times as expensive. And I found that if I use a 1/3 of ultra duration and then mix it with super juice, it's just as effective, but I also find it's easier to spread over the brow when I can have a little more in my ink ring. So for an entire procedure, I use 5 drops of ultra duration. That's it. So it just keeps my costs down for numbing without sacrificing client. I was going to use the word comfortability. Yeah, that's not a word. Client comfort. Oh. Okie doke. So let's try that. Sorry, I'm going to put some numbing on this side too, but let's try that reverse stroke second pass and see how that goes. See if that gets enough ink in there. If it doesn't, we'll do a 3rd, but from what I can see, she does produce a little extra lymph. And so in your extra lymphy clients, you do want to keep your passes to a minimum because it's going to produce more and more lymph, which is going to produce more and more scabbing, and then they're going to end up with one, big chunky scabs instead of more individual scabs. And if they're more individual scabs, they're going to flake off when they're ready. If they're chunky, one scab will pull another scab. So that's why we like to avoid that. I'm getting all sorts of video ideas right now. Gonna add that to my 3rd video idea now. Oh dear. This is just a never-ending project. I love it. It's so fun. Okay, so her brow bone dips a little bit here. I don't know if you can see that. I'm gonna try to fill out that area a little bit more. I don't want it to go too crazy though, because I can definitely do more on touch up. But my feeling is that we'll have to, in order to trick the eye, we're going to have to kind of bend out this middle section kind of from here to the tip of the arch in order to make that pop a little bit more. Okay, so with that this reverse pass, I'm really trying to follow each line as carefully as possible. That's another huge trick to crisp lines, is just honestly being so careful about tracing over the exact same spot. And I'm putting a lot of ink on my ring and, or sorry, on my blade. And by the way, I went one level lighter, as well as added just a little bit of warmth, kind of a caramel warmth into this formula for the second pass. The depth took in her skin pretty well, actually, but I just felt like it was a little bit ashier than I expected. And her veins are green, so she doesn't need the gold, but I guess we are going dark enough to where we need to make sure she has the caramel. And just looking at her skin overall, I wouldn't say she's tan. So so she is one that needed that caramel in her ink. But I tend to sometimes just do it at the very end as a mask, or because she's not really like overly pale, so sometimes I like to see how the neutral tone goes into their skin, and then from there decide if I just want to do it as a mask at the end to add a little bit, or if I actually want to add it into their formula on second or third pass. But just keep in mind that having that warmth in the first pass is going to put the most of it into their skin. Second pass, kind of the next option for putting into their skin, but less than what the first pass will do. And the mask really puts just a tiny bit of it into the skin, and it's kind of in those top layers, and it just doesn't implant it nearly as deeply. So, okay, sorry, I swear I'm trying to get a good angle on this, but so I'm standing across, like, opposite direction that I normally do. And basically where my strokes normally begin, end, I'm now beginning, so everything is just backwards right now. I'm trying so hard to get this good for the camera, but I guess the important thing is that you know what I'm doing. And make sure to still get a nice stretch when you're doing this. And literally the exact same way that you put that stroke in, do it except reverse. Again, where you stopped, start. And I talked about how doing shorter strokes like this sometimes feels a little more patchy. By reversing it out, this helps with this as well, because just kind of think of I don't know. I'm a hairstylist, so sometimes if we are applying the product up, then we'll apply it down, and it just gets it in there more than just going up twice or down twice. I'm trying to think of like a real world example of this. Brushing your hair upwards does not work. Okay, just painting in general. Let's say you're painting a wall. You want to apply it, they tell you to do W's, right? So kind of cross hatching it. One going kind of more at a left-right angle, and then one going more of a right-to-left angle. Right to left, left, right, yep. So same exact idea. It just, there's something about it that having the blade go in at both up and then down, it really does help. Oh, beautiful. It really does help to get more pigment in there. And anytime you see there's just too much of a buildup of product on your blade, just do a quick wipe off of it. And you're really not going to be able to see what I'm doing with this brow at all. And I'm sorry, I'm going to go ahead and just do it here because you understand what I'm doing. That's the important part again. I also heavily recommend, I know everybody says, work on practice skins, and it's like the worst thing. And I know that it's nothing like human skin. I'm completely aware. However, if you do a brow, however you feel like doing a brow, and then the part that is really helpful in training and kind of doing some drills and what's going to actually help you, practice tracing over those exact same lines, like exact same. And go ahead and practice doing it reverse. And because if you can just get to where it's second nature to go over the exact same lines, it really is going to help on human skin. Now, as far as flow and deciding, where to put those lines and things, it does help practicing, but at the end of the day, where you're trying to blend it with their natural hair, it's not super helpful. It's not super helpful unless you're working on an alopecia client to do skin after skin. But again, practicing depth, because you can actually take the skin and pinch it and see if there's consistency with how deep each line is going. And in tracing your lines, that is where practice skins, you can really utilize them to elevate your work. Okay, so I'm almost done doing these reverse strokes. And also you can see that I'm just doing kind of a shorter kind of 1, 2, 3 soft tapping that pigment in. That's something that I tend to utilize whether I'm going reverse or regular in my second and third passes. And that's something that I do don't really know why, but it just is. And I guess it depends on the skin too, but you'll develop your own techniques and what works for you. As long as you're getting the right depth and getting enough color into their skin, your retention will be amazing and your work will be amazing. And that's what's important in this business. So curious to see if we're going to need shading on her. I hardly ever shade. If I do shade, it's on touch-up. And I usually tell the clients that. Because some people, their strokes will heal to be almost twice as big. Some people 1.5 times. Some people doesn't get any thicker. But if those strokes spread at all and then plus shading, it just usually ends up a blurry mess. So I tend to wait and see how they heal before I add shading. But we'll see if it's not looking, especially with that underside on the right brow, if it's not blending well, it might just drive me crazy enough to do shading. Look at that. Can you believe how much more pigment? Just one more pass and that reverse stroke. Don't think we'll have to do a third. That makes me super happy. And you know what? It isn't 100% balanced. It could possibly use some shading or a few more strokes, but I'm going to go ahead and leave that for touch-up. And I always tell my clients, guys, that we are aiming for 90% perfection on first session, because people always get so worked up and so worried about absolute perfection. And so you just tell them right up front, like, hey, we're aiming for 90%, and then we get it perfect on your perfecting session. So they can show you little things they want to change and whatever, and be like, okay, great, let's talk about it on your perfecting session. Because if they go home expecting them to be perfect, they're gonna scrutinize them, analyze them, and get freaked out when they're not. So just tell them up front to not expect it. Okay, so I'm just blotting her before I do her final ink bath. This is a technique I always blot at the very end, but if I know for a fact they have a lot of lymph, I will even blot before the final ink bath, because if we squeegee out some of that lymph, let's see here. Oh my goodness, that is a lot. That is a lot. Look at this, and there's even little bits of blood, which is so funny because my pressure is so light on her. It's crazy. For some reason, there's not a lot on this other side, which is interesting. Okay, but she was right. She's a heavy lymph producer, so I'm glad that we only did 2 passes. And honestly, guys, this looks lovely. I think we matched her natural hair pretty darn well. You can kind of see in her sideburns, but then also just her brows themselves. And just as a reminder, this was her before. Just really cut off on those tails. There we go. So see, those shorter, kind of more uneven V strokes just gives a really soft, natural brow. We might need to go even a little bit darker on pigment at touch-up. And we did talk about that. She wanted as light as possible to still blend with her hair. And I think we nailed that. I really am in love with this brow, actually.